are these people?
Joe, since this is local-ish for you, since you're based in North Carolina, so we know of, as I said earlier, we know of the strikes that are happening. UPS potentially is going on strike, hopefully. Riders, workers are going on strike. Didn't know about this. Thanks to Joe for bringing this story to us. Waffle House, or at least this location in Waffle House, is going on strike, or at least has gone on strike by the time that we're talking about this. So we're going to start with a TikTok. It relates to the story very well. Here's one of the workers who are kind of explaining a little bit on what's happening, and then we're going to read an article about this whole thing. So go ahead, Reef.
Dear Waffle House management, we, the undersigned workers at Waffle House, are standing together to demand that we are provided with a safe and healthy work environment where we can adequately provide for ourselves and our families.
Waffle House workers in South Carolina went on strike this week, demanding better safety, pay, and working conditions. Workers at the store say they regularly experience unsafe and violent situations, and this isn't an isolated incident. Many service workers say their bosses are putting them in harm's way, according to recent surveys by the Strategic Organizing Center.
I was working 17-hour shifts back to back. This ended up leaving a toll on me and taking me to the ER. I ended up with a kidney infection, and it was so serious to the point that I ended up on morphine.
This strike is following a wave of service workers organizing in the South, supported by the Union of Southern Service Workers. Members of the union are ready to build worker power and take the fight back to the bosses.
It's important for us to stand up and deliver demand letters and take action together, because without us, these corporations can't run. Waffle House can't run if all of us walk out. We can't let corporations and bosses take us apart.
You're no good. Treat your workers like you should.
Waffle House no good. After that, that's the banger of the summer right there.
I can't wait to get into this. Let me catch up.
Yep.
Wait.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. So this article is written by in Post in Korea. Written by Hannah Wade, where the title is "Working for Scraps: Columbia Waffle House Workers Strike Over Low Pay, Workplace Safety." And so Hannah writes, too much. On the same day that waitress Naomi Harris, that's the girl who you saw speaking in the TikTok, delivered a letter of demands to management at Waffle House on Garner's Ferry Road, she called the police, saying belligerent customers had pulled salt and sugar into go cups and threw them across the restaurant's counter. It wasn't the first time Harris dealt with violent or unruly customers in her less than 2 months at the 24/7 diner chain, she said. It's one of the things that pushed Harris and her co-workers to go on strike the morning of July 8th, a week after publicly serving their petition to organize and enlist demands to Waffle House management. The employees are on strike over what they say are multiple issues related to safety, pay, and staffing shortages. We are working for scraps and pennies, Harris said. We can barely buy the basic necessities that we need to live off of. We can barely take care of ourselves. Around 10 a.m., July 8th, 5 employees surrounded by around 24 other labor organizers began a 3-day strike of a Waffle House where they work, located at 7428 Garner's Ferry Road, according to 2 striking employees.
I could shut down a whole town. Waffle House striking for 3 days. You know?
Shay Parker was one of the workers striking on the bright, clear morning in the Waffle House parking lot. An on and off employee of Waffle House since 2001, Parker said she decided to join her colleagues' strike after hearing them read their list of demands on July 1st. I hope Waffle House will listen and make the necessary changes to be made, Parker said, because lives are on the line for the little bit of money that we make. Among the demands listed in their petition are fair and consistent scheduling, sufficient security for each shift, higher pay, and repairing of equipment, which workers told the Post and Courier included a malfunctioning air conditioning system. The strike is supported by the Union of Southern Service Workers, a group that describes itself as by and for low-wage workers across the service industry. Workers told a post in Korea that they've dealt with issues like unruly and violent customers, understaffing, unwanted charges taken out of their paychecks, and working conditions that one employee blamed for landing her in the emergency room.
Well, and you know,
Summer school miser.
Friend of the show, Jesse Jett, worked at Waffle House for a while. You know, and it doesn't disappoint. Gunfire in the parking lot, stabbings, you know, all the fun stuff happen at Waffle House at 2 a.m.
We've seen the TikToks and the clips on Twitter where the fights happening at a Waffle House. And while some of them are funny, you know, I will admit, but often not, that's the reality of, you know, like of what these Waffle House workers, you know, go through. I think a few years ago when I was in Atlanta, visiting my cousin, he was living in Buckhead at the time. We went to a Waffle House after we went out, drinking or whatever. And like, basically, I mean, it was Friday night, early Saturday morning. There was basically a fight, you know, that like 2 fights that were occurring, you know, while we were there, to the point where we didn't even get our food because they were so understaffed. They took forever to get food, you know, prepared and everything. I think we probably had to wait for maybe like close to 45 minutes to get our food.
Speaking of Atlanta, guess who funds? Guess who's one of the large funders of Cop City? People in the chat already mentioned it. Yep, bingo. So you know, fun stuff.
But anyway, summer school miser Cochran often worked late night shifts when she first started at the Garner's Ferry Road location in February. Most of the time, she was the only waitress on a typical 10-hour shift, meaning she ate and used the bathroom if there was time, and often there wasn't, she said. The workers' petition cites understaffing as a key concern. Gee, I wonder why. For the safety of customers and staff, we need adequate staff to run the restaurant during first, second, and third shifts. At this time, it is difficult to impossible to take breaks because there's not enough staff present.
Yep.
In mid-March, 21-year-old school miser Cochran had a kidney infection, which she blames on long shifts during which she couldn't make time to use the restroom or eat. Experiencing excruciating pain, she landed in the emergency room, she said. That was one of my worst experiences, school miser Cochran said. Honestly, I never had any reason to go to the ER. I've never really been a sick child or anything. I've always been pretty healthy. She missed several days of work and lost what she estimated to be anywhere from $80 to $120 in pay during the shift she missed, she said.
Those medical bills
said
ain't
another
cheap.
coworker. Right.
You
like
know.
no Medicare for all, and I'm sure many of them do not have insurance.
Yeah.
So she was probably paying out of pocket for that.
I wouldn't even want the Waffle House insurance.
Or at least her family was.
You know. Like
Harris said another coworker became sick to the point of throwing up in kitchen conditions that workers believe are too hot, which they blame on the faulty air conditioner. It wouldn't be the first time the diner had issues with repairs. Health Department inspections from June and August 2022 reported problems with rusty shelving, broken equipment like dishwashers, and damaged floor tiles. The heat is very unsafe for workers.
That's that Hell's Kitchen
for the
noise.
Customers and the workers. Physical safety is on the list of workers' demands. They've asked for security at the diner. The restaurant is only staffed with security guards during the weekend night shifts, employees said. They want to see security at each shift after they said multiple violent incidents have occurred when security isn't there.
Yeah.
I've been threatened to be pulled across the counter over a wrong order, school miser Cochran said. I've had a guy who came in very belligerent a few months ago, and I declined to serve him. He flashed a knife at me. She often relies on her cooks to act as impromptu security in those situations, she said. A month before staff serving management with their petition, a customer with a gun threatened, Jesus.
Dude, I'm hitting a motherfucker with some hot grits. I don't give a fuck. You know, like, motherfucker's gonna catch a skillet.
I'm laughing, but this is happening while they're protesting. Like,
I know. Yeah. Fucked up, dude.
A month before staff serving management with their petition, a customer with a gun threatened Harris and other staff over an order of hash browns,
Hash
she
browns.
said.
I asked for it chunk.
Like, I was like, dang, I'm gonna die over some hash browns, Harris said. That's all I could think about. I'm about to die over hash browns.
I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Just please find other employment. Like, fuck what? Just everyone leave. You know?
Can you zoom out, please?
Yeah.
Thank you. Other Waffle House locations across South Carolina have faced issues with safety. A Waffle House in Kearnshaw was robbed in March. In January 2022, a Columbia Waffle House employee was robbed at gunpoint. The July 1st phone call Harris made to police related to the unruly customers was confirmed by the Columbia Police Department. Aside from what workers called unsafe conditions, employees said their weekly pay is not enough to make ends meet, a common plight of minimum wage workers across the country.
Yep.
All my money goes straight to rent and bills. I can't even afford to buy myself groceries, Schoolmeister Cochran said. She often gets help from her parents when it comes to groceries and food, she told the Post and Courier. She has applied for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, often called food stamps, 3 times and has been denied. Yep. The waitress said they make the federal minimum wage for tip workers, which is $2.13 per hour. The intention is that the bulk of their income will probably come from tips. Schoolmeister Cochran, right, and who gives tips if they're, and considering that the food is very cheap, it's not going to be like, you're not going to get a lot of tips out of that either way.
No,
if you're lucky to get a tip.
If people going to the Waffle House don't have the money to like give you for tips,
right?
Like,
right. Schoolmeister Cochran estimates she works anywhere from 21 to 35 hours each week, and with tips, brings in a salary ranging from $70 some weeks to $170 in others. When she's not working at Waffle House, she holds down a second job as an assistant property manager for a storage facility.
As they often do.
If you work 40 hours a week, you should make a wage where you don't have to still live in poverty or still live on governmental assistance. State Rep Annie McDaniel, Democrat Fairfield, told the Post and Courier, that just should not be in this great state of South Carolina.
Great state.
McDaniel spoke in support of the workers when they publicly delivered their petition July 1st and appeared on a TikTok video they posted in support of their office, what we just saw. Yep. The workers are also concerned about deductions from their pay that they believe are unfair. Employers are allowed to deduct charges for goods and services from employee paychecks, including for
meals or lodging.
According to the U.S. Department of Labor. But workers say Waffle House doesn't let them opt out of being charged for meals during their shifts. It's a policy that the Garner's ferry workers want changed.
Food that they end up
the Waffle House corporate
at the end of the day.
Right. The Waffle House corporate employee handbook meal credit policy provided to the Post and Courier by an organizer with USSW states, meals are made available to non-exempt hourly restaurant associates as a condition of employment, and the company will automatically take a meal credit against wages otherwise due a non-exempt restaurant associate, and the associate's wages will be reduced by the amount of the meal credit taken based on the hours worked by the associate per day in accordance with meal credits guidelines set by the company. Why isn't it for free? Why don't they eat for free? That's the very least you can do.
About the money, Lebowski. You know?
Anyway, workers at the Garner's Ferry Waffle House said in practice at their store, this translates to a little over $3 per shift coming out of each paycheck for a mandatory meal. And if the workers either don't have time to eat during their shifts or choose not to eat a meal that day, it still comes out.
Oh, that's even more fucked up.
They're going to take out that money from my check for that meal deduction, whether I eat or not, Harris said. You can't opt out of it. The employee's petition calls for to the company to end the mandatory meal deductions from wages. Or better yet, just give them the food. As we said, they're gonna throw it away anyway. Like,
You greedy dirtbag!
but cooks like 46-year-old Jesse Gant, who has worked for the company for 24 years, hourly pay sits a little higher. Gant said she makes $16 an hour, but doesn't believe that's enough for the time she has worked for the company. That's a whole lot of bacon, eggs, and waffles, Gant said July 8th as the strike got underway. I've lost track of how many meals I've cooked. Waffle House declined to comment on specific issues brought up by the employees. In a statement to the Post and Courier, the company said, Waffle House is proud of its long record of effectively addressing any concerns our associates report to us. We intend to do that directly with our associates. In the parking lot during the July 8th strike, a 67-year-old onlooker smoked a cigarette as he told a Post and Courier reporter that the workers on strike were ungrateful. I think it's ridiculous. They could make more money in tips, and they want to stand out here and strike, said George Kimberly, a Waffle House regular. They don't look at the big picture for the company. You can get fuck yourself. But other bystanders spoke out in support.
Shame.
One older gentleman told workers to stand your ground. Staff at Waffle House has joined other service workers across the state and country who organized in response to the low pay, harsh working conditions, and staff shortages. In July 2022, baristas made Columbia's Millwood Avenue Starbucks defer to unionize in South Carolina, part of a national wave of unionizations for the coffee giant. And in January, employees at a Dollar General in Irmo went on strike, citing issues with staffing shortages, safety, and pay, which was also supported by the USSW. The group takes a different approach from traditional labor organizing, which typically focuses on establishing formal unions. Instead, the USSW aims to cut out the oftentimes lengthy unionization process by supporting worker organization through other means, like striking and handing out demand letters. Nothing's sacred. We're ready. There's power in numbers, Harris said. We're going to keep fighting by any means necessary. Gee, I wonder which organization that we talk a lot about should be doing this.
Yeah, would be smart.
I mean, we don't need to say them here because we talk about them often enough, and we talked about them and how do we miss that over the weekend.
I mean, Waffle
Joe,
House got that
Catch me outside. How about that?
energy, and I'm fucking here for it. Like, keep that up.
So this is probably one of the better labor-based stories we've covered, you know, just as far as they know what they're up against and they're doing the thing. They're making clear demands and they're going for it. They're not waiting, you know, for certain things to rise to strike. They're just going ahead and do it. And more importantly, they're standing in solidarity with other labor workers from other places, which again, and I've said this, the fact that the teachers or National Teachers Union and the Nurses Union have already endorsed Joe Biden for president a year and a half out, when there should be the solidarity among labor right now, not just with them, but with every labor union possible in the country right now, should be coming together. Like, the idea that only certain groups in the labor movement are striking and some are not, I think is just completely ridiculous. Like, this should be more of a massive movement, which is why I kind of say, like, I don't have any hope in the labor movement, given there's no loyalty to labor at all among these different industries. It's just the idea of, like, if you're in a white collar labor, then you're kind of going against blue collar. So, but again, good job to this Waffle House. Joe, since you brought this story to us, your thoughts.
Something that I've said ad nauseum, various podcast is that we need mass worker strikes across this country, not only intra-industry, but inter-industry. This is the type of labor movement that America sorely needs. It's the type of labor movement that we should have had back in the summer of 2020 when NBA players went on what's called a wildcat strike after the shooting of, it was Jacob Rude, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yeah.
He was shot 7 times in the back by a white police officer named Rustin Shesky while he was unarmed. The Milwaukee Bucks, and this happened just outside of Milwaukee. The Milwaukee Bucks said, we're not playing this basketball game tonight. The NBA playoffs, they can take a rest. And other sports leagues followed suit. And it was Barack Obama that convinced the players to go back to playing basketball. And then there was this mass social justice facade that took place in the NBA by painting Black Lives Matter on the courts, by having inspirational words replacing the names of the players on the backs of the jerseys, and it all amounted to a whole lot of nothing.
Thanks, Obama.
America now more than ever needs labor-focused movement, because if we want our political outcomes to change, it's not going to happen through political means, because political means got us to where we are now. If we look at some of the labor movements that we've seen around the world, Che Guevara, take a look at what happened in Poland about 40 years ago with Lech Walesa. Lech Walesa was not a politician. He was an electrician by trade. He was an electrician and eventually became president of Poland. You take a look at with Evo Morales. Evo Morales was a labor, he was a farmer, and he led a group of farmers in a labor union and eventually became president of the country. Evo Morales in Bolivia, if I'm not mistaken. So we need a mass workers movement across this country. And as I said about an hour or so ago, the racism is a function of economics. And the whole reason, quite frankly, why Donald Trump got elected was Donald Trump is the first rich white person to appeal to poor white people. Again, economics. There's a whole lot of people who are in this Waffle House strike and some of the other strikes that are taking place right now, most specifically the United Parcel Service strike that's going to happen. And I guarantee you, their solidarity is not about that some people being a Trump supporter or some people being a Biden supporter. Their solidarity comes from labor rights. Their solidarity comes from the ability to unionize. By the way, for those that don't know this, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights has 30 articles which describe certain basic tenets of basic human and civil rights that all people on earth should have, simply on the basis of being human. Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that the ability to have labor rights, the ability to unionize, is a human right. Think about how labor unions have been crushed in the United States. Take a look at 1947 with the Taft-Hartley Act. Take a look what happened most recently with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. What was left of unions after the Taft-Hartley Act of 1947 was completely crushed by the North American Free Trade Agreement. By the way, one of the main architects of NAFTA and one of the co-sponsors of NAFTA was none other than Joe Biden. You can go ahead and look that up. He was part of that whole situation. So something that I've been a major proponent of, and you guys have seen me do this, and whenever I play a show on a Saturday night, I always make sure I wear a yellow vest, and I always talk about the yellow vest movement that's been taking place in France over the past several years. The yellow vest movement is not a political movement. It's not a group of people who are leftist supporters or Jean-Luc Mélenchon supporters. And it's not a group of people who are right-wing supporters or people who support Marine Le Pen. This is about labor rights. It's about labor, and it's about making sure that the centrist and neoliberal policies of Emmanuel Macron, who is a banker by trade and never held political office before he became president of France, takes over. It's about labor rights. The yellow vest is about labor rights. The black vest, or the gilet noir, is also about labor rights. Why can't we have that sort of labor-focused movement in the United States? Why didn't we have this sort of labor-focused movement in the United States during the pandemic? What would have happened if a group of HVAC workers, UPS, and a bunch of deli people slicing deli meat at Safeway, and a couple of bakers at your local Whole Foods decided to say, we're not doing anything until everybody gets healthcare?
Partially because we've seen what that happens in America before. Pinkerton comes out with Gatling guns, and eventually,
I mean, again, a group of steam fitters that install water heaters could have said, we're not doing anything until everybody gets their $600 a week.
Yep.
We're not fixing water heaters. We're not changing your oil at Jiffy Lube. We're not slicing your deli meat at Safeway. We're not putting your frosting on the cake at Whole Foods. We're not doing anything. We're not doing anything. Oh, the people at 84 Lumber, no, we're not stacking wood in your truck. Sorry, we're not doing anything until everybody gets what they're supposed to get. There needs to be a mass workers' strike across this country. And I'm hoping what happens with Waffle House, I'm hoping what happens with UPS, I'm hoping with the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors Guild. And by the way, I have a couple of friends of mine who work in the entertainment industry who are currently dealing with not working right now.
Yep.
And we don't know when they're going to be able to get back to work. Everybody needs to stand in solidarity. If you are a working person in America, you should be standing alongside UPS. Why isn't FedEx jumping on board with this? Why isn't DHL doing something with this?
Mm-hmm.
If Waffle House is willing to go ahead and say, no more hash browns, no more orange juice that we're not really sure is actually juice, no more coffee, no more ham and cheese biscuits. We're not making any food until all of us get what we're supposed to get. Why isn't Burger King jumping on this? What about McDonald's?
Right.
What about Chick-fil-A? What about Five Guys? Any of these fast food places? What about the restaurants of the United States? Applebee's, Chili's, etc. Why aren't they signing along with this? Because again, if you're serving food in a Waffle House, and Waffle House is as bad as it gets from a culinary perspective, why aren't five-star restaurants doing the same thing? Because if they could do this at a Waffle House and completely overwork employees and make them feel unsafe, don't you think that could potentially happen in a 1 or 2 or 3-star Michelin-rated restaurant? Potentially. Why couldn't it happen there? Not necessarily in terms of the safety issues, but in terms of overworking their employees, putting them through 16, 17, and 18-hour shifts. Why isn't that happening?
Yep.
There needs to be a mass workers' strike across this country. Shut this entire country down. The workers of the world need to unite, not just the workers of the United States, the workers of the world, because this is also happening. These sorts of the continued exploitation of workers is not just happening in the United States. It's happening in Canada. It's happening in the UK. It's been happening in France, Yellow Vest movement, and it's happening in plenty of other countries around the world. The workers of the world must unite against exploitative multinational corporations that continue to extract labor and resources from poor indigenous people, from Black people, from other people of color, from impoverished white people. It's time to take a stand. It's time to take a stand. This is not about color of people's skin. This is not about a political affiliation. This is not about sexual orientation or gender identification. This is not about your religious affiliation. No, this is about labor. This is about getting up in the morning, going to work, and coming home at night and earning an honest day pay. And every 2 weeks, you get your money directly deposited into your checking or savings account. This is about labor. This is about making sure that people have a reason to get up in the morning and stay there at night, and go to bed at night. And there's, and look, and Collin, brother, you said something that's brilliant. You said something earlier about 20 minutes ago when you said, yeah, there seems to be a beef between white collar and blue collar. There seems to be a beef between white collar and blue collar. Again, that is a class struggle, quite frankly. It's a class struggle. Look, there's no shame in going to a job where you have to have a shower when you come home from work, as opposed to having to take a shower before you go to work. There's no shame in either type of work. But white people in white collar positions also need to realize that they are being screwed also.
Right.
Being screwed also. Take a look at all the layoffs that have been happening in the tech sector over the past few years. Take a look at all of this. Take a look at all of the potential layoffs that are going to happen with the Screenwriters Guild, because AI could potentially take their jobs.
Right. For the jobs. They're taking our jobs.
Take a look at Wall Street. Take a look at the financial sector. So if you're wearing a Brooks Brothers suit or a Boilers suit, it doesn't make a difference. Your job is at risk, and there is strength in numbers. There is solidarity in numbers. My uncle told me this years ago. He said, Jojo, he'd always call me Jojo because my dad was named Joe also. He'd always say, Jojo, you got to move as a fist, not as fingers. You have to move as a fist, not as fingers, because if you're separate, there's no impact. You can't make impact when you just have 5 fingers floating around. But if you have a fist and everybody's together, solidarity, strength in numbers, that's when you can make an impact. You can't punch somebody with an open hand like this unless you're Bruce Lee, but Bruce Lee was supernatural.
Anderson Silva, eye pokes are a thing, you know? Like,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I feel you.
Yeah, but strength in numbers, solidarity, coming together. Okay, coming together. There's a reason why in the 60s, the Black Power symbol was a fist. It was a fist. It was about unity. It was about coming together. It was about coming together. And it wasn't just about Black people coming together. Take a look at what Fred Hampton was doing. He was getting a group of Chicanos together. He was getting poor white people in alignment with Black people. This is quite honestly no different than what I talked about 2 hours ago with the Palestinian struggle and how Black people need to align themselves with the struggle for Palestinians. Again, it's the same type of unity we're talking about. There, it's a persecution. It's a persecution of a right-wing Israeli government against Palestinians, similarly to a racist American government towards Black people, American descendants of enslaved Africans, immigrants, indigenous people, etc. But again, this is about labor rights. It's about labor rights. It's bourgeoisie versus proletariat. It's the haves versus the have-nots. And the haves are winning right now. And it's time for the have-nots to take something from the haves. It's not about eating the rich. It's never about eating the rich. No, it's about making sure that the workers of the world get what they're supposed to get for a fair day, an honest wage, an honest work environment, safe working conditions. Collin, you're a teacher. You're a teacher. My ex-wife was a teacher. There are plenty of instances where she had to deal with students who were at minimum unruly and at worst unhinged and unsafe.
I mean, Reef and Reef, those of this my my 2 in particular this past school year that, you know, if I were a less experienced teacher, I would have been out of the field already. They know. So, but yeah, I think again, it's just the idea of this should be, while it's encouraging to see pockets of these labor strikes or potential strikes happening,
right?
It's frustrating that there should be more of a coalition or cohesion among all labor right now. Because as you said, you know, even in the white collar jobs, you know, our jobs are at risk as well. And we're not safe in terms of, you know, in areas of tech, in education, in finance, especially as things are becoming more streamlined and moving more on the tech side of being more automated, there doesn't need to be people doing the things that originally, you know, like a person had to do it. So
Right. I
we
mean, you can program to do everything that a certified public accountant can do now. What good is it? What good is a CPA when you can go ahead and have a AI program do your books for you or do your taxes? What's the point? And something else that I wanted to go ahead and talk about with regards to the Waffle House strike. And I just thought about this in the context of a slide that you were reading, Collin, about 15 minutes ago regarding the lady with the hyphenated name and healthcare and going to the hospital.
right.
Something that I have a little bit of knowledge about is healthcare in the United States. And as I'm sure you all know, the Affordable Care Act is not a Democratic policy. It's a Republican policy.
Romney care.
The Heritage Foundation, correct. It's essentially Romney Care or Mass Care. The Republican Party, a conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation, created what's called a three-legged stool model of healthcare. The three legs of the stool are access to insurance through the Medicaid expansion, government subsidies, and a fancy rule called the individual mandate. Now, normally I would say let's focus on the individual mandate, but for the context of this story here, I want us to focus on the Medicaid expansion. There are now 41 states in the United States that have accepted the Medicaid expansion under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. Now, you're probably like, well, yo, Joe, nice. What's the Medicaid expansion? Let me explain what that is. The federal government, most specifically the Department of Health and Human Services, provides each state with a particular amount of money called a block grant. The federal government says, hey, state, here's a bunch of money. You can use it for whatever you want as long as it is related to healthcare. So what most states have done, instead of providing direct clinical care, what most states end up doing is expanding the maximum salary allowed to in a particular state, so more low-wage earners can qualify for Medicare. But what it does, every state in the United States has this unfortunate phenomenon, and it is what's called the coverage gap, where you can have a wage earner that makes too much money to still qualify for Medicaid, but not enough money to qualify for Obamacare premium subsidies. Every state in America has this, what's called the coverage gap. In some states that did not accept the Medicaid expansion, like South Carolina, the coverage gap is huge because they didn't automatically raise the maximum salary allowed to still qualify under Medicaid. Okay, so in a state like South Carolina, you might be working part-time, but not necessarily have enough hours, and you might not have the means or capability to have a second job. So you might make just enough money to not qualify for Medicaid, and you make too much money to qualify under Obamacare for premium subsidies, which means you are screwed because you can't possibly afford health insurance. There's no way that could happen. So this might be another part of the reason why this strike is happening in South Carolina, because they're a state that did not accept the Medicaid expansion. They didn't accept it. Georgia did not accept the Medicaid expansion. A bunch of the states that did not accept the Medicaid expansion are in the southern part of the United States, which is no coincidence because many of the governors of those states during the passing of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act were Republican governors that did not want to do anything that would be seen as supporting a Black president in Barack Obama. And they also did not want to do anything that was supporting or helping anybody in their states, especially poor white people and Black people. Now, if it goes to help rich white people, they're all for it. Take a look at Brett Favre. Take a look at what happened with him. But if it involves making sure that poor white people and Black people get an opportunity to have help, get health care, get affordable housing, get grocery stores in their neighborhood so they don't have to worry about food deserts. No one wants to deal with that. So this is such an important topic because I think the mainstream news of the United States doesn't talk about labor movements. Look at what happened a couple of years ago in India when 250 million farmers went on strike. That is 250 million with a B people went on strike. And then a bunch of civil servants decided to join them. Then a bunch of truck drivers decided to join the civil servants and the 250 million farmers that were already on strike. American mainstream media didn't even bother talking about that.
Oh no, they don't want to give people ideas.
You don't want to give people ideas, right? And again, 250 million people is 25%, just about 25% of India's population. Could you imagine what would happen in the United States if 25% of America's population went on strike, or about 81 or 82 million people went on strike? What do you think would happen? Could you imagine if 8 million people went on strike in the United States? And again, Collin, this goes back to your point. It doesn't need to be a whole lot of people. It just needs to be a few people here and there in the right places. No different than the power that the squad could have exercised. No different than the power that the Tea Party or the Freedom Caucus could have exercised. No different than a group of Zionists that eventually took over what is now known as Israel. Again, small group of people, but could you imagine if there was intersectionality and solidarity in the working class in the United States? And again, I'm not asking for 25% of the American population to go on strike. Could you imagine, again, if 8 million workers went on strike, and it has to be the right 8 million workers, grocery store employees, truck drivers.
You could basically say essential workers. If
any, all of that, any and all.
Take your pick within that. The ones that were essentially called heroes during the pandemic are now.
Remember, kids, sing it with me. You got the power.
Heroes.
Take it back.
America is boiling right now under excessive heat. Excessive heat. What do you think would happen if HVAC workers decided to go on strike tomorrow morning?
Oh my God.
A union worker said, yo, we're
Texas
not doing anything until. Think about this. What do you think would happen? What do you think would happen if a bunch of HVAC employees and a bunch of swimming pool installers in Texas, Florida, and Arizona and California said, we're shutting it down. We're not doing anything until see all that $600 a week back pay that the government still owes a lot of us? We want everybody gets that back. Then we'll start thinking about fixing your air conditioning. Then we'll start thinking about filling up your swimming pools with water that we might not necessarily have.
Yep. How does unity go, Collin? How's that unity work? This
unity doesn't represent what you're against. It represents what you are for.
Have those demands ready.
Look, there's an old saying, if you want an omelet, you have to break a couple of eggs. If you want an omelet, you have to break a couple of eggs. And maybe this is this now more than ever, this is a time for the working class of the United States to break a couple of eggs.
Yep.
And if the breaking of a couple of eggs means, you know what, there's going to be some people that have to deal with their houses being a little bit warmer than it already is right now, so be it.